Hi, you're watching TechCrunch TV. I'm Colleen Taylor. Joining me in the studio today are Cameron Winklevoss and Tyler Winklevoss, the gentleman behind Winklevoss Capital. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
And so we want to talk about your investments that you've made recently, big interest here in Bitcoin especially, a lot to talk about there. But just to get started, explain to me what Winklevoss Capital is, because I understand it's not a typical venture capital firm.
So, right, we have not raised outside money, so we're not a venture capital firm in that sense. But that being said, we do invest in venture type investments like startups and technology companies and whatnot. So I guess technically we're angels. Some might, in the East Coast they use the term of our family office. So we're sort of in between those two.
Okay, but with a keen interest really in technology. What are some of your investments that you've made so far?
So our first investment was SumZero. It's a community of buy-side investment professionals. Our next one was Huckster, which is a tool that allows shoppers to track items for sales when they go on sale, and it alerts you by email or text. And our latest interest has been a lot in Bitcoin and BitInstant, which is a retail gateway to buy and sell Bitcoin.
Right, and yeah, so we had reported on the BitInstant startup, and I want to talk about that company in itself, but I also just want to talk about your interest in Bitcoin. You gave the keynote speech here at the annual Bitcoin conference in San Francisco, or in Silicon Valley, which is a huge deal. Winklevoss Capital owns approximately 1% of all outstanding Bitcoins, is that correct? Mm-hmm. So big bets here.
Yeah.
Can you just take me back to when you first found out about Bitcoin? What did you think of it? What was the introduction?
So last summer, Tyler and I were on vacation, and an individual who's a friend of a friend approached us and said, introduced himself, said hello, and then we started talking, and we had a bit of a conversation about digital currency. And then when we got back stateside, he sent some material over, and I started reading through it. And I looked at Tyler and I said, this is either completely made up and kind of a pie in the sky idea, or there's something really big here. And then we started to dig in, and one thing led to the next, and we sort of were at a situation where, do we invest in the currency? Do we try and find a company in the ecosystem? And we sort of concluded that we wanted to do both.
Okay, and you bought this big stake in Bitcoin. How is that stake doing? How has the currency changed since the time you bought it?
So we started buying in the high single digits. So we've done, the price, actually I haven't looked at it today, but it's been hovering around 100, 110. So it's been a good gain so far. But we're still very bullish on Bitcoin. We think it's really early days, and I think that there's a really bright future ahead for it.
Now, what is the thing that you look for in a Bitcoin startup? What made you invest in BitInstant? There are a lot of companies and exchanges and websites popping up almost every day, it seems.
Well, I think what we'd look at in a Bitcoin startup is what we look at any startup. Look at the leadership, the entrepreneurs. With respect to Bitcoin, regulation is obviously a big question for a lot of people, and nobody really has the answer right now. It's still evolving, but what you do want is a company that sort of takes that seriously and understands that there's the technology element, there's building the company, and then there's also creating the company that works with regulators, and they're happy, and they sort of work together to be compliant.
Okay. And so that's BitInstant. It's not this sort of completely underground thing. It's on
No, I think that's one of the things that attracted to us. They're not they're sort of not offshore. They're in New York. They sort of interact with regulators and speak with people all the time. And part of that's educational. And they happen to be, Charlie, the CEO, happens to have been in the space for a long time. So he's sort of on the pulse and the cutting edge. And so, yeah, we're looking for, I think sort of through the history of Bitcoin, there's been sort of the companies that don't have it together, either aren't being compliant or don't have their security down. And so security and all that stuff has been a risk. And I think the companies that you'll see a year from now there are going to figure that out, and the ones that don't will go away.
Now, one thing that I've heard is that some criticism about Bitcoin is that an investment in Bitcoin is almost like rooting against stability in the larger economic markets. Is this a bet that's saying, I'm betting that the dollar is going to crash, I'm betting that there's going to be political instability in the world, that you're finding solace in Bitcoin?
I feel like it's actually the opposite. It's sort of a healthy counterbalance to fiat currency. So without this alternative, there's no checks and balance on whether or not a country prints a lot of money. But if there is an alternative, then people can choose. And when there's choices, I think it generally makes things better. So it's going to help create a healthier fiat currency system. And I don't think one sort of kills the other. I think they live side by side.
Okay.
I think the reality also is that there's inevitably going to be mismanagement. Countries are going to run into issues, and having an alternative or a place where people can store value in, I think, is better than not, and sort of pretending that that's not a reality, or that there's countries that don't have a currency or a central government. So I think it sort of fills a void, and it's going to hopefully be a great store for people that inevitably run into a situation like that.
What's the biggest challenge for the Bitcoin space in terms of it really getting, further into the triple digits or the
I think
quadruples?
User-friendly. It's easier to convince someone about how cool Bitcoin is than it is to actually tell them how to get Bitcoin. And so it's kind of backwards. The positive use case scenarios have to increase, and the ability for people to use it easily, just like you might use PayPal or some other product, it has to be just as easy as anything else. So when that happens, I think we see Bitcoin continuing to grow.
It has to be easy for my mom to sign up and use it.
Right.
So I think in the last sort of run up when it peaked out at 260, whether you agree whether it was a bubble or rapid adoption, I think ironically the bubble wasn't even able to fully play out, if that's what you agree that it was, in the sense that the economy kind of choked on itself and sort of fell under its own weight. And so those situations where there aren't sort of choke points, where it's held back, those will be hopefully go away. And as Tyler was mentioning, it becomes much more user-friendly, where it's not a sort of a long conversation. Well, this is where you buy it, this is how you store it. And I think a lot of people are fearful of sort of storing digital money and the security aspects of that. But I think entrepreneurs are flooding into the space. Obviously, venture capital dollars are, and I think those problems are definitely fixable.
Okay. And I also want to talk just about you all as entrepreneurs. You've been here in San Francisco all week. What have the meetings been like? What have you been pitched? Is there one kind of company that you would love to see something special in that you haven't seen yet, that your sort of ideal holy grail kind of company?
I mean, right now, I don't want to say we're exclusively looking at Bitcoin, but we're very fascinated with companies that are not sort of, hey, here's an Amazon that happens to accept Bitcoin or something like that, but really a company that's building on top of the rails and going to harness the strengths of the protocol. And then we're actually speaking down at Stanford this evening on digital currencies. So as you can tell, we're focused a lot in that space, but I think the word disrupt is probably overused a lot, but it works. And companies that are disrupting, whether it's in money or finance with Bitcoin, or in the way people save with Huckster, or the way people get investment information through SumZero, that's sort of the initial litmus test that we use. And then, of course, we look at the entrepreneurs and the people involved.
And now you both have obviously become well-known personalities from before your time as investors. What does that reputation bring to the table now when you're meeting with people and really getting in? Is it a positive thing? Is it a negative thing? Are there any misconceptions that you kind of have to clear up when you go into meetings?
I think it definitely opens the door, the fact that people know us. When we get to see people meet with us, I think they see we're passionate and hardworking and serious about investing in companies and entrepreneurs that are going to win. So yeah, it's been really positive so far.
Sounds good. And last question here, is there any possibility that you will take on LPs and turn Winklevoss Capital into a more traditional venture capital fund at some point?
I think
Anything's possible.
Yeah, anything's possible. Sure. Right now we really like the sort of nimbleness and flexibility that we have. We can buy Bitcoin through sort of Winklevoss Capital. We don't have to do it sort of off to the side. We have that flexibility, but we're always sort of, I think having other people in on deals with you as co-investors it's generally more fun, and a lot of good things come of it. So we're always looking to build our network with people who like to look at the same type of things that we do.
Great stuff. Well, Cameron,
Yeah.
Tyler, Winklevoss, thank you for coming by TechCrunch, and keep us posted.
Thanks for
Thanks
having
for having
us.
us.